Hello everyone and welcome to the Indigenous Voice. First of all, I would like to thank the volunteer and Shaw staff for making this show possible. And in our first segment, and as usual, whenever it's possible to have a talk with Elder Tsartlip, we go and do that. And today, Elder Tsartlip, it was us. And welcome back, Elder Tsartlip, to the show. And I would please, what do you like to talk today about? What issue you'd like to talk about?
Well, in the past few weeks, months since I've been coming here, we've talked mostly about the issues that confront Indigenous people in British Columbia, Canada. And I think today was one of those days when you watch the media news and the Prime Minister and the Premier of British Columbia, Horgan, for the first time meet and talk about the issue of what is on the agenda for British Columbia and the country. I think the Premier of this province has made it pretty clear, at least from what I can understand, that the issue regarding Indigenous issues is at the top of the list and how things might be best done in British Columbia for not only for the good and benefit of Indigenous people, but we too concern ourselves about the good of all people. But where the government lacks is when we become included. We have not been included in these kind of discussions before. It's mostly been done by the federal government through the Minister of Indian Affairs or Indigenous Affairs now. They have been the one representing us, but now it's no longer like that. The law of the country has changed, that the Indigenous people must now have a voice in what is decided in British Columbia, Canada. And that is going to be a big challenge for the citizens of this country, especially here in British Columbia, regarding many of the management of resources and the concern we have with the environment. These issues have got to be clearly addressed and understood by all parties, not just the Indigenous people, but all people in this country must know, especially in British Columbia, because it's not only First Nations, Indigenous people that get affected by the management of the resources and the wealth of this province, but it's everybody, today and tomorrow and in the future. That has not been clearly defined to us what it means by the province of British Columbia, the previous government. And this goes back, way back when the Mackenzie pipeline went in, many people objected to it. They were afraid of what was going to happen with the Mackenzie pipeline and the oil being taken out of Canada into other countries. We've always been concerned about the way it's managed. Well, this was in 1977. Now we're back there again in 1917.
2017.
We're there again, talking about the same things. And the result of that meeting in 1977, the corporations keep winning these battles of us trying to say something about the resources in this province in terms of the oil, timber, all of the resources that sit on the traditional lands of Indigenous people. And we have not had that opportunity because of the way the federal government manages the responsibility and authority that it carries over Indigenous people. Well, that is now ended. It's no longer like that. The Supreme Court of this country has said clearly that it is the Indigenous people, the heads of the clan, the heads of the house, and the Indigenous hereditary system has now got to take place. The band councils, who are creation of the Indian Act, no longer have the final say anymore because it's the band councils under the Section 2 of the Indian Act says that band councils are board of directors subject to all laws of Canada, corporate laws of Canada, and corporate laws of British Columbia. So we're trapped inside the Indian Act, but not anymore. Because the government tried, the government of Canada, the province of British Columbia have tried to say that the legal representation of the First Nations people, Indigenous people, comes under the Indian Act. The Supreme Court of Canada said no. The real true leaders and representatives are the heads of the clan, the house leaders, and the Indigenous leaders of the tribes now. So there's some major changes in this country that we're going to have to go through with the governments of Canada and the province of British Columbia. Because if we don't go down that route, the Supreme Court has said that until there is true consent, nothing is going to happen. And the law has said that now, so true consent then has to be established and developed with the federal and provincial government. Our main concern is our relationship. The treaty tribes, the pre-Confederation treaty tribes, are only connected to the Crown, the federal government. We have no treaty with the province of British Columbia. So these talks have got to take place, and they've got to be clearly understood that until Canada carries out its responsibility, and including the First Nations, Indigenous people of this country, in terms of the treaty, not too much is going to happen, because it's the law of the land now, not because I say so, because Supreme Court of Canada has made that clear to both the federal government and the province of British Columbia. Now, all of these details now have got to be looked at so that there is true consent that the tribes, Indigenous people, can agree to in terms of resource management, including our participation in the economic, social development in this country and in British Columbia. It's no longer going to be managed by programs and policy as developed by the federal government or the province of British Columbia. Those things have now been taken off the books, and we've got to start all over again.
Elder Tsartlip, been the last, I think, maybe 16 years or of the Liberal, but before that the NDP were there, and you have many Canadian provincial government coming, but never were any serious change to the Indigenous matters. I have actually, when you mention about the Indian Act, I have one simple question, which is, can the Canadian government be serious about reconciliation before scrapping out completely the Indian Act, which is basically a racist document?
Yes, I think that's what the Supreme Court addressed. Because the provinces and the federal government have tried to avoid that issue of, it was just about meetings, and it wasn't about reconciliation. But now it is about, if there's going to be reconciliation, reconciling our differences, it has to be understood what those differences are. Because we do have a law that pertains to the management of not only our communities, but our relationship with the new immigrants of this country, starting back in 1492. So that has got to happen. It's not a simple case, I think, of adjusting programs, whether it's First Nations language or developing some kind of economic scheme that has never worked. We have to have input into it now. It's no longer just about including us in some discussions that maybe Crown corporations have an interest in, because it is the management of two legal entities that must be looked at, which is the Indigenous people and the federal Crown. These are the two major players that affect First Nations people in terms of our treaty, which now includes the Human Rights Declaration, that now recognized all around the world. So those issues then are going to be faced with some serious challenges where the public is going to have difficulty in understanding it. Not because they don't want to see change, they just don't understand. We have lived under the federal government, since the introduction of legislation regarding the Indian Act, and it has caused nothing but pain in this country, right from the Pacific to the Atlantic, north and south. It's caused tremendous pain for our people. And even though there's been so many studies, documentation, court decisions, Supreme Court decisions, governments and its bureaucracy are not prepared to really talk about what has to be done, not what should be done, what has to be done. Because the lives of our children are at stake here. It's the risk that we face if government doesn't change, not only in terms of the education of the diverse public, but the education of government itself and its bureaucracy. The bureaucrats create the biggest hurdle that we face because of the many people have developed a career under the Indian Act, and they're not prepared to let go of that career, all because some Indians are dying somewhere. They're not prepared to do that. They want to make sure their pension plans, their secure jobs are there tomorrow. Well, that's now ended. The dilemma we're in now is how do we approach it? How can the government best change its responsibility towards First Nations people, Indigenous people? Over the last half a century, studies, statements made by First Nations leaders across Canada have been saying it over and over and over again. This is what must happen now. It is no longer about the minister or the Indigenous Minister of Indigenous Affairs. It must now be up to the people. You cannot run a country from the top down. A country must be run from the bottom up so that we can participate in a truly constructive terms of reconciliation, where we can build these issues and concerns together rather than having professionals and lawyers and consultants telling us what's good for us. It hasn't worked.
But this state, Elder Tsartlip, since started 150 years ago, been always from top to bottom government, but in the same time, the Canadian government care a lot about its image internationally. Some First Nation took the Canadian government to United Nations and to International Court, and it was embarrassing. Why not? the indigenous leaders go to United Nations or international court just to explain what have been done by the Canadian government to the indigenous people and make sure the rest of the world know exactly what happened?
Well, again, like I said at the last time I was here, it's really not up to the Canadian government or province of British Columbia anymore. It is up to the law of the land now.
Mm-hmm.
See, if there is going to be any really constructive reconciliation, the task in front of us and the damage that has been done in this country to the First Nations, Indigenous people, is far beyond our imagination. If we think the Jewish people, the 5 million they talk about that were
In the Holocaust, during
their country,
the Second World War.
in Canada, it's in the millions. Here, in the beginning of the 17th century, studies have been done where it shows that over 50 million Indigenous people across this country, and including the Pacific, have been either terminated through genocide.
Actually, the number is, I just, like from 3-4 years ago, I read a study by a very prestigious institute from San Francisco. The estimate number is 102 million. Since the first interact between the colonial settler or Europeans and the indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, I think the official number is around 2 million. They say there were 2 million, were actually it's 102 million.
I guess, you know, when I think about this, you know, I made this statement made by Colonel Powwow, you know, the leader of the American Army. He said shame should be a guiding principle, but shame has not happened in this country. You know, just on the Atlantic last week, they were having a big demonstration regarding Cromley or something like that. I can't think of his name now, who put a bounty on the Mi'kmaq people. If you hunted them down and killed them, you got paid for it. And they built a monument, a statue in his honor. Mm-hmm. Well, the people there have protested. They said, how can Canada allow this to be celebrated? Mm-hmm. The people who had a bounty on the original people of this country, how could they give such recognition? So it goes back to the statement, you know, Canada is not ashamed of what it does. In the last 20 years, thousands and thousands of children have died from hunger, starvation, murdered, and now children are committing suicide. Anywhere from 8 to 10 years old, 14, 15-year-old children committing suicide. It's a crisis, but the government, for its own reasons, I guess, have to try to figure out why this is happening. They haven't listened to what we're saying. They don't want to hear our voice. They don't want to hear Indigenous voices. They would rather hire someone to tell them that under these laws of apartheid, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So sooner or later, and I hope very quickly, that we really talk about what has to be done. Mm-hmm. They have conferences, meetings with tribal leaders, and they shake hands at the end of the meeting, and that goes nowhere. It just shows that this Prime Minister and this Premier now has got to either change or to just face the same consequences, the same criticism that they've been receiving over the last 500 years. And I don't know when they're going to learn. I don't know what they're going to say.
I think you have a long patience, Elder Taslak, because you still kind of you have some hope with this coming provincial government.
Well, patience, I guess, is one of the virtues we have. And I believe it's a good one. Hopefully, this government, this new government, does something that going to change not only the lives of Indigenous people, but the lives of the people in this province. Because I mentioned the last time we were together that it's not just us that are caught by the management of the corporate law. You know, the expropriation of land, the expropriation of...
manipulation of food and...
Yeah. This is happening and governments are allowing it to happen. So who is running this country? You know, who owns this country? You know, it's the corporate world that owns it. It's not just here in Canada, by the way. It's right across the country, right across the globe. You know, we have more immigrant people owning land in British Columbia that are not living in British Columbia. And they own land, millions and millions of acres of land that they own, that the government has not yet settled the ownership of that land.
It's unceded
because
land.
it's traditional territory of the Indigenous people that these foreign companies now own, foreigners own. It's not even owned by British Columbians, it's owned by somebody. And this government, I hope, is going to show some real transparency, real meaningful words, constructive movements that move to a resolution where we can resolve our extreme differences, because they are extreme. You know, I use this word extreme because every day somebody dies, some child. Why does a child die? That has to be answered. Why children?
Elder Taslak, I want to just make it a little bit easier now. I know tomorrow you're going to Washington, to the south border, to explain how to the community there the proper name for the killer whale. Would you please tell us about that?
Well, I get involved in everything. You know, people phone me. It's mostly because of the language. You know, I speak two dialects, Sanchothan and Halqaminam. And there's been a big battle over the captivity of killer whales and sea lions and all kind of mammals from the ocean. And this particular issue now is about a young female whale that's held in Miami, and they've agreed, I guess, to transfer to Washington State because it's from Miami to Washington State. And they asked me what does that mean to us? I said, well, the killer whale is not a killer whale. It's not a killer by any means. We call it qaltalamatrin. That means it's a whale in English, but in our language qaltalamatrin. And because it's a female whale, we had to call it by what it is. And it's qaltalamatrin tanat. The last part of that word makes it a female. So now they're meeting in Washington State tomorrow evening. And they've asked me to help them in talking about what our language says about that. You know, we're held in captivity for the last, I think she's 14 years old now. And they want to know where it could go. And it's a legal argument between Washington State and Miami. But because it's in the Salish Sea, which contains both American First Nations and Canadian First Nations people. And they want the First Nations people to be responsible or to take part in determining where this killer whale might best live. But it's going to be tough going because, like anything that's been domesticated, this female whale has been hand-fed, looked after. She's protected in the area where she swims. And you put her in the wild, we have no idea what's going to happen because of the traffic in the Sailor Sea. The ships that go through here, hundreds of ships and boats go through here all day long. And she may not be familiar with it, and then she'll probably die here, get run over, and she may not know how to hunt for her own food. So the issue that I think we need to address is the whales or anything that's held in captivity for any length of time. We have to bring those kind of issues to a stop. And it's for amusement, amusement parks, marina parks, where they have these whales and sea lions and every kind of mammal that comes from the ocean is trained in captivity. And we know what captivity means, We know what happens when you keep something in captivity for any length of time. It's almost certain death. But I have to go there tomorrow morning, catch the first ferry, and talk about how we can best maybe accommodate to bring this female whale back to this part of the world, because that's where she was born. She was born here in the southern end of Vancouver Island.
And I wish you a very wonderful trip tomorrow. And thanks a lot, Elder Tsartlip, for giving us again your time to explain many important issues. And hopefully we'll see you soon when you get back from Washington to tell us about what happened with the killer whale. I wish I knew the name and the indigenous name, but I will try to remember to learn it soon. Thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's your show, Elder Tsartlip.
Thank you.
Always good to see you. Welcome back to the second part of Indigenous Voice, and it seems today it is Sampson special. We have with us Angel Sampson, Khulubuwit.
Yep.
Your Indigenous name. Welcome, Khulubuwit, and Angel. She is the coordinator of the Yellow Wolf Powwow, which is going to happen between the 4th and the 6th of August. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just one of a few coordinators. I have, it's a family affair, and we all participate in getting the whole event organized. But yeah, it starts on the BC Day long weekend and begins on Friday evening. And there's lots of powwow drumming and singing and dancing, a lot of colorful costumes. There'll be arts and crafts for sale. There'll be traditional foods, maybe, people want to try. But we also have like a Western fare as well, like burgers and hot dogs and whatnot.
But this year it's going to be in a different location.
Yes. We needed to let people know that, unfortunately, we ran upon some complications with the public restrooms and whatnot. And so we had to move our venue from 800 Stellies Crossroad to 7449 West Saanich Road, which is the Tla'aulnuk Tribal School. So we'll have it on the grounds up there. It's going to be very different. We held it there once many, many years ago. But everybody liked the old location, I think, because it's right down by the water. But this year, we got to make do. We have to do what we got to do. So. Yeah.
And it's the 28th anniversary.
24th.
24th.
Yes.
Would you tell us a little bit about the background of the Yellow Wolf Powwow?
Well, we started the powwow I guess my late brother John, and I started talking about the direction we wanted to go, and I thought it was kind of important that we honor our mother's traditions because we've never really done that. When she moved here, she came as a young girl from Idaho.
Yes,
And yes, she's Nez Perce, and so she came and she left all of her traditions and her practices when she met my dad and lived our way of life here in the Coast Salish territory. So we decided we would start doing powwow, and we would make the connections with other people in powwow, and so we could get to the point where we could host the event that we are now hosting. And so we made friends in Washington State that helped us with the drum, with songs, helped the boys learn how to sing because it's a rather, the sound of the powwow singing is rather high, a high tone voice, like almost a, what do you call them? Not a soprano, a tenor. And our guys have very deep voices for the winter dances and songs. So it was really different, but we wanted to do this to honor our mother and share some of her traditions and her cultural practices. And we had the right to do it because our roots were from the Nez Perce tribe as well. So
exactly.
yeah, so we wanted to share that with people. And way back when we started, we were trying to find a way to bridge the gap between First Nations and non-First Nations people. You know, we've had a lot of conflicts in different areas of our life over many, many years, as I'm sure you've heard a lot of it from my older brother, Tom. But, you know, this event is a very social event. It's not a political event. It's not a time to discuss business of any kind. It's a time to bring together various nations in an intertribal way and try and have a weekend of fun and celebration. You know, you can do a lot at a powwow. You can do a naming. You can show a picture of someone who's passed. You can get married there. So a lot of things can happen. And we've had a lot of marriages at our powwow now.
Oh, that is dangerous. Okay.
Yeah. So, but it's a fun event, and then it's for all ages. Right from the tiny tots, we have what's called a tiny tots category. And the babies, they get dressed in their regalia. They're just too cute, you know. And it goes all the way to our elders, and you'll see all the various dance styles there. The traditional dancers, they have like most of the adults will wear like eagle feathers, and then you'll have like grass dancers where they have like yarn costumes or sometimes ribbon costumes, and jingle dress dancers, they have like a metal cone that goes and has to be sewn onto their dress. And so yeah, you get to see all kinds of dancers coming. And then we get visitors from like the Kwagil Nation. They come too. We've had visitors from as far away as Africa that have been in our grand entry. You know, it's wide open. So many people show up, and everyone's welcome to participate.
Yeah, last year was first time for me, and there were a group of Syrian refugees. Elder Tom Sampson invited them to tell them that Indigenous people always open their hand and heart to people who are fleeing from war zone and refugees. And it was really very nice. And I saw there was, as you said, the 3 different days. In each day there is a different category. Usually they start with the youngs, and there were many of them, they're very cute looking, kind of having like all this items on a little baby walking around, and with this,
I know. You know, it's amazing how early they learn to follow the culture and the traditions, and what we do at the powwows is to really encourage our young people to follow that path. You know, my mom was a strong advocate for the youth, whether it be education, sports, or culture. So this is something that we really like to promote year after year, and get a lot of the kids involved and participating with all aspects of our event, you know, whether it be working in the concession or dancing or helping with taking care of the grounds. Everybody helps out in one way or another. But yeah, my mom was a very strong advocate for the youth and getting them involved in positive experiences.
And how it, I'm sure it's required a lot of work. So when do you start planning? From the end of the last one?
Yes, pretty much. You know, we're a nonprofit. We're not a registered nonprofit, but we pretty much have to raise our own money to host this event, and it costs roughly around 20,000 or more to host every year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so we literally penny pinch and we nickel and dime it. When we first started, we had $5 in our bank account, and we did fundraising event after event. We started doing performances around the city with our Yellow Wolf drum group, and any money we made went to our bank account to help pay for the powwow. We approached businesses, especially a lot of the businesses we frequent, for donations of any kind. Even if they couldn't financially support us, they gave us things we could use in raffles or something like what we call a loony toony, 50-50, like all kinds of ways to sell their donation. So yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it takes a year to make that kind of money happen.
And I'm sure a lot of members of the family are involved as well.
Yeah. My youngest grandson, Jackson, he's only 5, but he helps out.
5.
Yeah.
Okay. What does what does he do?
He helps in the concession. He helps with picking up if there's any refuse lying on the ground. He'll go and help with that. He has participated in the powwow dancing,
Nice.
but not as in the competition part. But you know, we encourage it. He's a very thoughtful and helpful child, and we like to promote that with our kids. So they start pretty early. And it's a good thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, when I attended there, it was really, as you said, a relaxing environment. People sitting, and it was actually at that time was very nice weather.
Very warm.
And so sunny. And
Yeah. Yeah. So we like the public to know where we are, and what we're all about, and that they're welcome to come. I always said to many people who call me, if they want to come for one day only, make it Saturday. Make it a full day. You know, bring your lawn chair, bring your blanket, bring your umbrella to protect you from the sun, or wear a hat. But Saturday is a very full day, and there's so much going on, right from a child that may be joining the powwow circuit for the first time. There may be a variety of entertainment that happens during the dinner break. It's a 2-hour dinner break on Saturday night. But there's so much to see. There's so much arts and crafts surrounds the whole grounds, and people can buy the most amazing things, and at such good prices, you know, because you're buying directly from the artist. You're not buying it from a store downtown, or not to go bashing anybody, but I think it means a little bit more when you get to meet the artist and you get to hear about how they came to make that product. You know, it's a really good experience. So I encourage the general public to come and
on Saturday,
learn a
they
little
have
bit.
to come one day.
Learn a little bit more, and understand what a powwow is, and understand how important it is, the regalia that we wear, and that they need to understand not to make fun of the regalia, because I've seen commercials, I've seen parties and people dressing up in what they think is traditional First Nations regalia, and it's kind of humiliating and degrading. So I think if they can come and experience something like the powwow, they get a better understanding of how important it is and how sacred it is. So I'd like to see more people come. You know,
And
I mean, we get a lot of visitors. We really do. from all over the world, because we're really close to Butchart Gardens, our location. So we get a lot of people, tour buses that come in to take pictures of our school, that where we're going to be.
Yes, and
So-
especially with the school, the connection with the language school, it's very, very nice choice, by the way. It's a great place.
Yeah, well, it's going to be fun. I think, like in every year, we've been very fortunate that we get great weather, and we're surrounded by the trees, we're surrounded by nature, and it really is a beautiful location. People, I think, will like it.
Angel, beside the preparation of working on the Yellow Wolf Powwow, what other issue you work on?
Oh my gosh. I am an early childhood educator. I've been involved with childcare for 30 years. We have a lot of issues around childcare and the need for it in our communities. And it's often quite difficult for First Nations communities to build daycares. You are having to approach the province to build a project like a daycare facility on federal lands. They have no jurisdiction, but we want to be able to have the kind of buildings that their children need to attend. So we then have to get a license, so it makes us obligated to follow provincial rules and regulations to work with our own children. So that kind of stuff is important to me. I've been doing it for a long time. I was fortunate enough to apply for a grant from the Ministry for Children and Family Development. I think it was 10 years ago now. I built a daycare for the Songhees First Nation, and was lucky. I got almost $334,000 to build them a facility, and I was able to get them a lot of staff. The nation didn't have to pay for anything. I don't even think they paid our wages. Everything was covered under what we earned through subsidy and what's called CCOF, Child Care Operating Funding, and parents' wages paid for their child to attend. So a lot of stuff like that. But I was very successful in getting that funding, and I'm working on another project for myself right now. I've applied on behalf of myself to build a preschool and daycare out in Brentwood.
So you seem follow the line of your mom.
I know.
To take care of kids and family. It's great.
And it's even goes back farther. My great-grandmother, whose name I carry, Hulipulwit, she was a midwife and delivered most of the children in our community for many years, because she was born in, they figure, around 1848 or something, and she was still alive in the 1960s when I was a little girl. Yeah. So they don't have a record of her birth in the local church here, but I think they might have it in a church in Chemainus Bay.
Like 100 years.
There's a lot of records kept about our people in Chemainus Bay for some reason, in a church up there, I think it is. I'd like to find out. I'd like to know when she was born.
Church?
I think I'm pretty sure. There's someone was telling me that I had brought up the fact that my great-grandmother was this old, and they said, wow, records go back that far. There's a place in Chemainus Bay, they said, where they've kept a lot of the records of births of First Nations people on Vancouver Island. So I'm going to go check it out.
Yes.
Be interesting to find out when she was born, because she was baptized and she was a teenager. So that was I think in the mid to late 1850s.
1850s, wow, okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, passionate about a lot of things.
And you mentioned you have kids. How many kids do you have?
One.
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 And seem like enough. But he's helping you. Seem like
Yeah.
It's not like.
He's doing a good job. He's a good dad. He has 3 sons, and he's a rapper. He actually is doing a lot of shows in the Victoria area. So yeah.
You said 5 years old.
My youngest grandson. My son is a lot older.
I thought you're talking. Okay, you were talking about your grandson, the 5 years old, who is helping you with the. Okay.
With the powwow, yeah.
So and okay, and your son has only one son or
No, my son has 3 sons.
three sons. Okay,
Yeah.
three boys.
16, 10, and 5.
Okay.
I know.
Wow, nice. And just the younger one who is helping with the yellow wall?
Oh, no, no, no.
All of them.
They all help. They all
Okay.
help with setup of the grounds, with the blessing of the grounds. Jackson is not old enough to really. Well, he could, I guess, help with the blessing of the grounds because he's a grass dancer.
What is the blessing of the ground?
The blessing of the grounds, we get someone to come in and say a prayer for our event and for all the people that are working at the event, for all the people that are traveling to our event, that everything goes well, that everyone is kept safe, and that everything is turning out well, you know?
As planned.
Yeah, and that everyone has a good time. So this blessing of the ground happens before we begin any work, even setting up of the grounds. We have someone come in and bless the grounds for us and say a prayer to the Creator to help us with our weekend event.
What people can bring with them, like food, or you
Well,
said there's food there already, but
yeah.
what do you suggest for people to bring if they're staying a long day there?
Well, a lot of people bring their own picnic stuff, you know, if they want. They don't have to. We will have a concession there with. We provide a salmon barbecue plate on Saturday and Sunday only, but we have other things like Indian tacos,
Okay.
and Indian hot dogs, regular hot dogs and hamburgers,
Okay.
chips, sodas, coffee, tea, water. So that kind of stuff is available, and I think we also there's a fellow who comes in and provides like French fries and other foods, more Western foods.
What about musical instrument? Are they allow people, like, is it okay for people to bring with them drums, for example?
I don't know in what capacity do you mean?
Um, d- uh, w- there is already the one who perform the music are already decided who are not. There is no more people can come and join them and bring with them their own drums, for example.
We've had visitors from all over the world come who wanted to be added to our schedule of events, and what we've tried to do is accommodate them. We even had a bagpipe person there one year, but we had a flute player come from Colorado. We've had singers come from all over the world that I don't know how they heard about us, but they came, and we just find a way to squeeze them in there. If they have a talent, we welcome them. They'll come and talk to the MC, and the MC will say to the crowd there, do we have time for this, right? Let's put them in here. So it just depends on what it is and where we are in our schedule of events, because we have a program that we try to stick to. But we're open. We're pretty much open.
Okay. What do you said? Many people sometimes ask you many kind of silly questions. What kind of these silly questions?
Well, some lady emailed one of our organizers and asked, am I supposed to wear a certain kind of clothes there? And no, we don't expect people to dress up special for this. It's a very casual event. Come in what you're comfortable wearing, you know. We encourage people to wear their sunscreen, you know, because it can get pretty hot out there in the field, and it's all on open ground. There are trees, but they're quite a ways back from the powwow circle. So we encourage people to, you know, wear a hat if they need to make sure they have lots of water, bring a lawn chair or a blanket to sit on, find a place comfortable, and yeah.
In regard to pets, last year I noticed there are some, but this year you said it's the tribal school. It's kind of different.
Yes,
rule there.
our old location, we allowed people to bring their pets, and as long as they were on a leash and they picked up after their pet, that was fine. But being on the tribal school grounds is a little different. They don't allow pets up on the tribal school grounds because they have their own maintenance people, and it's the summer months, so there's not a lot of anyone around to really care for the grounds right now. It's limited, so we have to be careful on and how we respect the land that we're using for our powwow this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else and you'd like to tell people about? Let's remind again, it's from happening from the 4th until the 6th of August.
Mm-hmm.
And the best day is Saturday, not just as you said,
No.
it's also the most
Well,
convenient one, I think.
Well, I think because each day is different. Like on Friday night, it's more of a
Gathering.
social thing. You know, like people are getting their
Just
feet
getting there.
and bodies ready for dancing, and there's a lot of what's called intertribal dancing. And intertribal dancing is when you have all the dance styles, and visitors can come in and dance as well on the intertribal dancing.
Okay.
That happens on Friday night. Saturday, the first grand entry is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's when you have the grand entries when all of the dancers come in. They parade into what we call the arena, and we also have veterans that join our grand entry. We have royalty, princesses from visiting nations. We have a group of young people that have joined that Raven group, out in Esquimalt. I think you saw them all come in the grand entry last year. They come every year, and I got to remember the name. My gosh, I miss a lot of our powwow because I'm in
the middle.
I'm in the background of
Yes.
everything. I don't get to watch the dancing. I don't get to see all the event.
Have to take care of that.
Hardly ever. I've never seen. I went to watch my grandson join the powwow circuit one year for like 10 minutes, and then I had to get back to work. So it's busy time. So Saturday, like I said, if you're going to come, that day is so full of a lot of stuff. You'll see a lot of the intertribal dancing, a lot of the competition dancing of the various categories and styles of dancing. You'll get to have some of our traditional foods, and there'll be a variety of entertainment between 5 and 7 on Saturday night.
Nice, okay.
It's good, and then we go till about 11 o'clock, so we're quite high up on the hill where the tribal school is, and you'll see the fireworks coming from Butchart Gardens from where we are. So it's lively. It's a lot of fun.
Nice.
Very entertaining.
And what on Sunday?
Sunday is when you get to see the final competition. They're narrowing down who's going to win the prize money. And there's different categories, and different ages. The junior categories are 6 to 12, I think it is. And then 13 to 18 is the teen categories. And then we have adult categories, and we also have the golden age categories of our elders.
Okay.
Yeah.
It seemed that the most important day then for the dancers, because they work all that hard work and the decision on Sunday. In regard to taking somebody taking their camera and take a video, or
I think the best thing to do is when they come and they want to understand protocol, talk with the MC.
ask first.
We've got a number of older dancers there that would be able to stand in if the MC was not available immediately, and they would explain the importance of asking a dancer, "Do you mind if I take your picture?" We've had people share pictures. They do take it, but it's just kind of, if they're zoning in on one child in particular, it's usually best to go and ask permission.
Okay, and especially now it's so easy. Everybody has this phone of taking picture in any second.
Yeah.
But what about somebody document the whole event by doing a video for it? For example, especially for you, you are so busy.
I know.
So it would be nice later to see some highlight and see some video. We did that, by the way, last year, and you show it here on Shaw TV.
Oh, nice. Well, I don't know. I haven't gotten that organized yet, with that part of it. We've hired a photographer over the years just so that we can create our own album, and we're trying to get a Facebook page done and also a web page so that anybody around the world could find out about powwows, and they'll be able to look us up. And that actually happened a couple years ago. My brother was a vendor, and this couple came up to him and started talking to him, and he noticed they had an accent, and he says, "Where are you from?" "Switzerland." "Yeah." And he goes, "Wow, what brought you here?" He said, "We wanted to go on vacation, and we looked up Powwow, and there you guys were and on the internet, and we said, we're going to go and check out the Yellow Wolf Powwow in Brentwood Bay."
So work on that Facebook. I don't have Facebook, by the way, but it seems it's working.
But it's funny, you know, you never know who's going to show up one year to the next.
Angel, we seem like we are out of time, but
Okay.
very nice to hear all this info about the Yellow Wolf Powwow, which is again happening between the 4th and the 6th of August. And on the St. Chosen Tribal School,
It's Tleolnoch Tribal School.
Cleonoch
Yeah.
Tribal School. Again, thanks for being in the show, and thanks for watching this part of Indigenous Voice.